Of course, yes. So thank you for the invitation. We are so honored to be a part of your festival. I'm Nahlia Loren Couto. I am the writer, director, and producer for One Love. Um, the One Love project was embedded into a third year sustainable fashion program here in London, Ontario, Canada. And the third year for the students is to design and produce sustainable fashion collections. And then we work collaboratively with the music program, the film program, the theater program. So it's a collaboration where students can come into an experiential collaboration space with each other and using the gift of media, filmmaking, music, and fashion. Put together a narrative, and this year's focus was around ocean protection and very much about a one love, about inclusivity and diversity and love for all humans. And that love extends to our home on this planet. And so we have a few different messages coming through in One Love.
Now, as someone who knows, well, let's just be honest, nothing about fashion, although I am wearing an Out Film Festival t-shirt. So I just wanted to point that out.
Nice to represent.
Could you explain, I hear the term fast fashion all the time. What distinguishes sustainable fashion from so-called fast fashion?
Such a good question. And honestly, sustainability and sustainable fashion or green fashion gets thrown around all the time too. So we're very conscientious that the way in which we teach and we experience and understand sustainability in its most simplistic sense would be to, in a very meaningful way, design fashion with a purpose, and to also be conscientious and mindful that the resources that we're using to create that fashion is taking into consideration the footprint that it's leaving behind. So can we create something without taking away, and to do so in a way that we're upcycling, recycling, using organic, minimal chemicals, and that sustainability is not only in the resources and materials, but with the people that are experienced in that. And so the biggest difference between that fast fashion sustainability would be a lot around like time production. So a fast fashion would need to be produced really, really quickly in the cheapest way possible at the lowest wage possible. So not taking into consideration the human wage, the ethical wage, the treatment of the person, the chemicals, the dyes, the resources, to get that so quickly to market. And it's disposable. Whereas the sustainable fashion will be how long, how durable can this be to have this for as long as I possibly can be without create with most minimal impact possible to the environment and to the people.
And that visually, that's front and center as Lauren is caught in the web and then sort of struggling with pieces of floating plastic in the opening shots of the shore.
So I love this kind of conversation. It gives the Easter eggs to what's happening. So Lauren, of course, is stripped down to her uncomfortableness in her skin as she's contemplating and considering and being bombarded by all of these heavy stories around what it feels to be comfortable in your own sexuality, whatever that looks like. And really looking at fashion as a way of self-expression, alignment to values, expressing who you are or who you aren't. And so in that sense of gender identity, being in her flesh, drowning in her emotions, surrounded by, those were the offcuts of the collections from the designs that you see her selecting from the rolling rail. So all of the designers contributed their offcuts to that sort of pollution piece to understand the relationship between water and fashion as a resource for either growing the crops that create the agriculture that comes to the resource of the fabrication to the plastic that's in that water too. So we try to really merge the relationship between those two things, and the way that she was suffocating under the noise of who is it to belong in a society inside of your body and your sexuality. We merge those two together.
Well, I don't like to read anything about these movies before I screen them, and we screen hundreds to get ready for this festival. So the first time I watched it, I didn't have a context for what it was, but I did notice that as Lauren's trying on the different outfits, they're all marked as, works in progress.
Mhm.
And
as
so,
as they are a work in progress, so to speak, too. So I love that. And so we really try to find innovative ways to look at fashion film. The film itself being inside of a fashion film genre usually uses film as the runway. Film is the new runway. And we wanted to really approach and say, like, it's not about the outcome of what that is, but the process for the designer in
hmm.
relationship with the collection is super important too. And to have Lauren trying things on to say, like, does this fit? Do I relate? And things were overtly feminine to not feminine to exploring her emotional reaction to what fits visually through that experience was what we were trying to do. So they became the runway.
Well, there's no, I'm no language expert, but there was something that changed in the shots when they put on that pair of striped trousers.
That's
There
right.
was
And that was
something
directed. The spark.
comfortable. Yeah,
Yes.
it was there. I saw it.
Great act. And not really, what was so beautiful was the intimacy and the authenticity behind this story, because this was not us writing a narrative and saying, oh, let's hire an actor. This is our story. Let's pretend this is happening. The beautiful thing that evolved here was that Lauren is a second year fashion student who was going through their own gender identification. And in that, we approached Lauren to say, we want this to be as truly authentic as possible. And this is not my story to tell. I would love this to be an evolution of a creative project that comes from you as the experienced individual. If we're writing a story about you, then I want it to be written by you in a sense. And so what happened was, as we were concepting the storyboard, Lauren said, I know this is kind of weird, but like I have this piece of writing from like when I was in high school that is like this really kind of raw journal entry about how I'm feeling.
Oh, that's great. I'm
And
sorry.
that
I'm
is what
jumping on
shared.
your line, but that
No,
was
that's
one of
okay.
my questions. Are those are her words, the spoken
Her
word underneath?
words, her words out of her personal diary
Very cool.
as
Very,
a teen kid, really being like trying to figure that out. And so when they shared it with us, I just said, like, I know you just wanted to share that with us, to think that it might be a seed to a narrative or to write a script. But I said, honestly, I think it is the script. And if
yeah.
you are courageous enough or willing enough um, to be as raw as that is, would you be willing to share that? And so, and then it just said, like, not only should those words be the script, but your voice and you. So
Yes.
it just evolved that where it was an outreach to ask for sort of almost an advisory about whether we were going the right decision. It just became that it's that beautiful thing where things just flow beautifully to use,
There
the
you
fluid.
go.
Look at us
Metaphor.
and play on words. But it just was like, go. I really just try to step back and allow for the magic of what should happen in these spaces happen. And Lauren was just so brilliant and so, again, really courageous in being as honest as they were.
One of the things that you said a couple minutes ago that is resonating with me right now is that it's the journey, not the destination.
Oh
And
yeah.
that you know that is very much the short. It doesn't land you anywhere. It just
It's not for me to land you.
right.
It's not for me to land you. And I think, like, Lauren, as a young adult, as an artist, and as a human being, is navigating, and not we're constantly moving, settling, sitting still, changing, evolving, and that's what fluidity is. And people, I think we have this tendency to want an outcome, want an answer, and I think it's not linear like that, the journey. And I don't think that it's important, quite frankly, what the identification is in the end. Ultimately, in that moment, in that time, in their body, in that space, that's what we're feeling, and that's all that matters. And certainly inside of spaces where the word for the conversation is around fluidity, it's allowing the freedom for that to take place without being forced into a space or confined by a space. And that's why we really wanted to include not a happy Hollywood ending that said, oh, everything's beautiful and we don't have any struggle anymore in an LGBT plus community. Like, no, it's
We're
an
all
all,
done. Yep. All
no,
better.
it's like the hopefulness around finding peace in the process was really what we were trying to do with the music and with the movement and with the light, and this acknowledgement of the strength that it takes to kind of come out of that struggle and that really deep, almost horrific. We wanted to start almost like a suffocating, like you're like, she like what's happening there, and not really understanding what that is. But then being clear that the societal framework that we're in is
Yeah.
still there. So that's why we have, like, we do need to still push against the boundaries and the labels and the identifications and the boxes. Like, it's still there. And so it was being real and yet really positive at the same. We were trying to find that sweet spot.
I wanted to ask about the water shots, the underwater, and particularly the
Mhm.
plastic ceiling, if you will,
Mhm.
where a lot of that
For sure. Yeah.
panicky,
So
stricken, enclosed feeling comes from. That
I
it
think,
was.
and the thing that we were trying to do here was really know that this is a conversation around belonging, and the belonging isn't always just inside of, although it happens to be for us inside of a gender or space, but belonging can mean a lot to different people, and the multi-level of that meaning around our production crew is there. And I think that when people are dealing with deeply emotional or traumatic or complex feelings, there's a sense of suffocation or not being able to breathe. And
Mhm.
so, and breath is life. And again, it doesn't matter what your gender is, and it doesn't matter your culture, the color of your skin, your sexual orientation. We all breathe. So that commonality of, like, again, one love is the breath of life, the sharing of life, and being able to breathe or not to breathe. We wanted to play on that metaphorically within that space, and also water as a source of life and it needing to be clean, and the sense of purification and the sense of rebirth. So we tried to play with all of those visual metaphors inside of that space. And yet it was really important to us to take Lauren underwater into the depths of her subconscious,
Mm.
and to also play with the idea of like a mermaid versus a mer person.
Ah.
And at the end of a runway, you always sort of have the bride coming out. And so
Hmm.
those two last pieces that Lauren is wearing as kind of the end, if you think about Lauren trying on all of the garments, that'd be like Lauren coming down a traditional runway. We still got to see all of the fashion in a deconstructed and unusual way. And then we ended with the very traditional trope of a wedding piece, but we took all of the remains of the garments, and all of designers worked on the dress forms. And so there's no waste, and they got turned into the final pieces. And we went from the really traditional sort of dark and bottom of going into the depths of the mud of what that looks like, to then transition it into that, like, letting it all fall and then move her through movement up and through the water. And then you have Lauren in the white, traditional sense of birth, marriage, like all those things that we have seen traditionally through time, and bring that in with the colors as well that you would see in our flag. So that was really important to have that kind of
The,
mythically moving.
the
So beautiful,
fluidity of
right?
those
The
multicolored garments
rainbow,
was
the
gorgeous.
rainbow. And
Yeah.
rainbows come as a result of what? Usually a storm, a rain
Right.
shower. So, like, we really wanted there to not be this binary of like one or the other, a black or a white. It's really celebrating all of the in between, which is the diamonds on the path of this journey, too, that things that would seem to be really difficult led Lauren to this really empowered place, which is very much the progress that we continue to have in these phases. Because what looks like it's in a really sort of stable or hopeful place for a moment in time can have a shift in politics, people, or country, and then things change overnight. We see this all the time. And in certain countries, the kind of safety and hopefulness that we have isn't the same kind of openness that we have from one country to the next, from one culture to the next. So the reality of that journey is very different for different people in different places. And that's why this kind of virtual international space is hugely important, because there are people who are fearing for their lives and are in really dark and tragic places around that identification.
And like film, like music, fashion is international. Fashion
Absolutely.
crosses all those cultural and political borders. So this,
And it speaks to sexuality in a way like nothing else does. So if you think about any kind of gender empowered movement or transition, even think about just from the perspective of uh, feminine power empowerment, it's like pants to skirts. It's been identified by what you wear, what you don't wear. So fashion has historically been connected in such a overtly creative way for me to be able to express who I am, even down to colors that would have been okay, not okay. And
right.
that's continuing to evolve and shift from space to space. So I think that fashion as it's so interesting as a creative discipline that can sometimes be made to be super superficial is overtly so powerful, because it doesn't have to speak. It doesn't even have to change into words. It just is. And so self-empowering because I'm putting it on.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
So true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nalia, this was amazing. Thank you so much for
Of
talking to
course.
me.
Thank you. My
We will
pleasure.